You know what?
No.
I saw other titles though. I saw the
That's why I asked.
yeah. Okay. Well, you send me another title. So
There was a time when, in late youth, Andy had enough hair for him to be pulled over by the police in his car all the time.
It, it was it
It
was
looked like somebody out of the Bible. I won't mention.
That's funny.
it
so
was pretty long, yeah.
Yeah.
we are online.
Hi, guys. Thanks for joining. This is Essence of History. Today, we're going to be talking about Anarchy in Action Misdirected. I'm Amanda Armagast.
I'm Dr. Abbasi for Essence, and it's truly my pleasure to introduce to you the Barlow father and son. And it seems that we have here some eyewitness uh, from episode of human history that is recent, but it's extremely important. In a way, they say the best way to not repeat past mistake is to know it. And many times the history that we observe is based on what people report, but more importantly, in my opinion, is having people who eyewitness that help us to understand the situation. So, without further ado, I would like you guys to introduce yourself and tell a little about your background, if you don't mind.
Who's going first, Andy?
Um, yeah, I'll go first then. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm Andy Barlow, Iva's son, and I work for Bombardier Aviation, have for nearly 30 years. And just before the holidays, had a wonderful session talking about my experiences seeing technology as it's grown throughout the last 20, 25 years as I've been in that industry. So that's kind of my background.
Thank
And
you.
I'm the senior one, as you can see, Ivor Barlow, and my life has really been well. I was once asked to give a quick introduction at a Probus Club, the clubs for retired businessmen and so on, and I did for a bit of a sort of joke entitled it "Bombs and Booze." And that series, when you look at it, has summed up my life. When I left school, we had national service and conscription,
Mm.
and and some of the places, if you ended up in very junior as you would in the army in day one, you could end up in a nasty situation.
What
Uh,
country was that, if I may ask? What country are we talking about?
well, we the Korean War was still on.
Okay. No, but are we
Uh,
talking about US, England,
Oh yeah,
Australia,
sorry,
Canada?
I was then in England. Yes, that was a bad assumption on my part. Yes, I was in England, brought up in England, and that time conscription, national service is still going on, and so there was the Korean War was just ended it soon after, but it was on at that time. Some of my colleagues ended up there, and there are also a string of colonial wars. I'd summarize it from Malaysia through Africa, Kenya, and places like that. So thought it was a much better idea to volunteer to go into the Air Force.
How
Uh,
old were you, if I may ask, at that time?
sorry,
How old were you when war was
just
going on?
17 coming on 18 at
Okay.
that time. Um, and so I ended up in the Air Force, and my after training, officer training and aircrew training, I ended up. It was the time, of course, in it was the around the late 1950s, and it was the time of the Cold War, and so my first tour, as they call it, was on V bombers, the Delta Wing Vulcan bomber, which carried nuclear bombs and it's sometimes conventional bombs, and life centered on that.
Those are legends. Those bombers are legends.
Are you gonna put
I want to actually pull up. Yeah, I'm listening to you, but while you're talking, I want to pull up a picture of those Vulcan bombers.
No,
Oh,
they're
yeah.
amazing.
I've
Yeah,
never
they're unique. Yeah. Uh, and when you look at them, you see that they really are a, a, like the Concorde, the only two aircraft which entered commercial or military service, which were pure deltas. They had no tailplanes. There they go. Yeah, and they 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 could carry either nuclear or um, that's a dramatic one, isn't
Yeah,
it?
that is a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is sort of visualized, though, the few times in the history, certain weaponry or machines really changed the balance especially at that time, Cold War was starting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think obviously nuclear war heads and so on. They were but this airplane. I have read a book about this kind of technology. It was a big player in changing the balance. That all of a sudden, that we had a machine that could deliver the nuclear bomb to the footsteps of anywhere in Russia. Please
Yeah.
go ahead. I want to know more about your experience there.
Yeah, well, that was an all-consuming life. There were times when each there were three squadrons on a station, and each squadron had one aircraft permanently on standby, armed and ready to go. And the normal readiness was 15 minutes to be airborne. And if there was any security threat, that could come down to 4 minutes. Um, so it was a bit of an all-consuming life for a young fellow. We had to work
Yes.
out how to sneak off and play rugby or to do
Go
other
for a
special
pint.
things.
And sleeping in your flight suits. Yeah.
Yeah, but we managed to achieve it.
What
Uh,
did you feel, if I may ask? How did you feel the first time you saw that bomber and the first time you were in one? What were your impression of it?
well, it was quite different. I hate to use the word awesome; it's highly overused. But for instance, we would take off and go to 43,000 feet in 12 minutes.
Wow.
That's insane.
And if you put that in a picture of a modern powerful jet today, it's a lot different.
Yeah.
30,000 feet in 20 odd minutes.
But is the rate of climb is unreal.
Yeah, yeah. We could really maneuver them. Uh,
Mhm.
they, but ironically, you'll remember there was that U-2 incident
Mhm.
where Powers got shot down at the time when the CIA were operating
Yeah. Yeah.
the U-2s, and by the end of that week, uh, our whole uh, techniques and flight patterns had changed, where we would go to within radar range of the Warsaw Pact at high level, and then drop down, and we did the rest. It took a bit of getting used to, but we did 250 feet at nearly 400 knots for the rest of the way in. Um, to get underneath. So it was all continual change during that period. Um, After that, I did other parts, did the office squadron, did a bit of staff job, but still with Vulcans, with Vulcan training and so on, and bomber command training. I then did an aerospace engineering course. And at the end of that, somebody said to me, "Oh, well, at the end of the course, you're going to Mather." And I thought, where on earth is Mather? I couldn't think of anywhere where the RAF had a base called Mather, all the way from the Far East back through. Uh, well, what they've left out was that it was an exchange tour. I was going to be taken out of the RAF and dropped into the USAF, and a USAF officer would be taken out and dropped into my job. And that was part of the defense treaties, which was still in existence after the Cold War for the Allies to work together. And at that time, by the time I'd been there a while, that was the height of the Vietnam War. So I was suddenly facing another one. And
I think it was 67 or 68 we went to Mather.
yeah, we were there the full 3 years of 68, 69, and 70. And as a result of being probably living a bit too close to Napa Valley, Andy appeared as a real American.
Lucky me.
Now,
And
obviously, the development of this Vulcan and the Air Force and so on, all of that started in England during
yes,
the Second World War. That as a matter of fact, I think one of the technologies changed the entire course of history is that the radar and the way British Air Force used their Air Force,
yeah,
because that was truly the part that prevented Nazi Germany to invade England. Their use of Air Force, and they go back and forth who invented the jet engine and so on. It was probably many nations were involved in that. But I think what's amazing about the Vulcan and the development was how early it was. It was 1952 that this
yeah.
massive, unbelievably, and it is huge. It's a engineering marvel, and so on.
And
But
it was sorry to interrupt, it was a continuation uh,
yes,
of the same design team and same factory outside Manchester, which had made the Lancaster bomber.
and which is a legendary
Yeah,
airplane
Yeah.
itself.
so it went from one to the next. Yeah, um, and while I was over there with the Vietnam War, it was a tremendous drain on manpower for the American military, because
Mhm.
you were rotating, you were training people in jungle warfare,
Yep,
getting them ready, and taking them out of their normal jobs.
yep,
So just about every unit at that
yep,
time was about 66%
yep.
man level. And so I was told that no, there was nothing nice about being in California at that time. I was going to be treated like anybody else and have to do my bit. And I became a B-52 instructor. So
Now,
now,
I need to apologize, but I need to add for some people who don't know that. Now, we consider now United States the highest level of the technology and so on and so forth. Everybody needs to know who's listening to this, even up to the end of the Second World War, what we produce in the United States, we could produce volume, but technologically, they were not as advanced as what even German or British could produce.
yeah,
Meaning that, like Germans, they could produce a Panther or the tank or Tiger tank that could beat 6 Shermans. But we could produce more Shermans than they could destroy, considering the airplane technology like Lancaster or Vulcan and so on. People need to know, even in 1950s, is that the technology, it was much higher in British arm production than it was in the United States. First, in 1950s and 60s, US became really technologically more advanced than anybody else. But there is a reason United States ask you to come to California, because your expertise is what made our industry, our weapon industry,
Yeah.
what it is now. So there was a self-serving US doctrine behind it. We have the resources. We can build, like, for every Vulcan British can build, we can build 50 U2s and so on. But we need expertise of other countries. And not surprisingly, sad story, we brought lots of Nazis from Germany,
Yeah.
like Werner von Braun and many others.
I was thinking of Von Braun, yes,
Yeah.
with the classic ones,
So,
yeah.
so I'm happy
Why
you
did we
came,
bring them from Germany?
because we had the resources, but not technologically. We did not win the Second World War because we were technologically more advanced. We won the Second World War because we had the resources above and beyond anybody else. There is a saying from one of German generals that when he was watching these hundreds of US airplanes passing over Normandy, that he was just saying, my God, if I had only 1/10 of that resources, I would have captured the entire world.
That was, I believe, that was the Road to Arnhem,
Yes,
the great British one. They dropped all the paratroopers in three of the
yes,
cities in
yes,
Holland, and I believe there was something around 3 or 4 thousand planes involved in
Yeah.
that. It was just
yes,
this massive armada that flew over top, and I've heard that same statement as well. If I
yes.
just had 1/10 of that power, what I could have
Yeah.
done with it.
What I could have done with that. So thank you for coming to California. Give us more than just Andy.
Oh, well, we we certainly enjoyed that and took advantage of it, as you can imagine. Yeah, but it's an interesting point, though. I've always felt, and my colleagues and in my family, we always saw it, that we could do things and possibly invent things or develop things, but nobody could produce it like the United States.
Mm.
That was from even before Henry Ford got going and made statements and examples about it. But that's always been
Yeah.
that format, hasn't it? Yeah.
There is an anecdote coming from Winston Churchill that he was celebrating the day Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor.
Oh yeah.
He
Yeah.
told everybody the war is done.
Yeah.
Yep.
The
Well,
Japanese,
even the top general Ito, he made a statement that all we've done is we've woken the giant beast.
giant beast. And the reason for that, it wasn't because we had the best military. It wasn't because we had the most advanced technology, but they underestimated how fast we can change our resources or our infrastructure from building cars, pens, to building weaponry.
Yeah. Well,
They,
they created a bigger enemy, hadn't they, for themselves that way, because we're now combined.
Well, the United States is also a very protected manufacturing site.
Yeah.
Nobody was going to fly over the states and bomb it.
they
No.
So,
tried it. They tried
so
it. Couldn't.
there
Right.
wasn't the worry of that like there would have been in Britain and parts of the Pacific.
Yeah.
So the United States could just build at will and
Yeah.
just ship it out. So yeah, it was it was
It was a dramatic change and
Yeah.
quite yeah. And it's interesting, really, this progression and the way we've introduced this topic through mentioning the Vulcan. It's actually very similar to the relationship of Canada in nuclear development, which is where we sort of get to in the end of Amanda's title and desire for that story, because it's what you might call an ironic or a funny end to this progression.
Yeah.
And uh, at the beginning of the Second World War, Britain was in nuclear bombing techniques and science. And the atom itself, mathematically and physically, was first split at Manchester University around 1943. I can't remember the name of the guy who led the team now, but it's quite well documented. But with the war progressing and the airborne side of it and the dangers of it, that was moved to Canada,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's where the Canadians got involved at
Yeah.
the time. Then it was not the best thing. The Manhattan Project had started, so a bit pointless again, splitting resources
Yeah. Yeah.
at that time of history, and so they were combined into the Manhattan Project.
Absolutely.
How it
Absolutely.
grew, as you would know, and then of course Canada uh, had a somewhat indifferent and continually politicized approach to nuclear things.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, of course, in 1984, declared themselves, Pierre Trudeau was the Prime Minister, uh, as well known for other things as that. And he, they declared themselves nuclear free zone, whatever that meant,
Yeah.
when we're sitting right between the Great Circle Route between
Yeah.
Russia and America. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, you have to think hard,
Wait,
but
so what does nuclear free zone like really mean?
uh,
Yes.
that's the question.
But that means they're not going to let anybody station their nuclear
Well, you can't
weapon
hold anything there.
on their
Yeah.
territory.
Yeah.
No, because up until then, Amanda, there'd been nuclear weapons either flown in and out by the states and or provided in some of the smaller tactical nuclear warheads for the Canadians had, the Canadian Army and Air Force had. So they they were withdrawn. There'd been a couple of incidents where aircraft flying over with nuclear bombs on them as part of the deterrent force, because you can't be our policy in the West was one of deterrence.
Yeah.
Um, and you couldn't do that unless you were convincing the enemy that you could deter. You actually had the capability. So there were aircraft airborne. And obviously, if you're going to get there or anywhere near there, you're going to be over Canada. And one or two aircraft had simple things, common things, like engine failures, uh, and had to do something about it. And twice the bombs were released, and the air crew jumped out, uh, but they landed in Canadian waters or nearby.
Mm-hmm.
And again, for security and not wanting, uh, I guess it became a policy later, but wasn't said in the same words then. You didn't want a spread, if you could avoid it, of nuclear weapons. So the uh, ordinary explosive, the conventional side of a weapon, which has to be there to make the nuclear one work,
Mm-hmm.
nuclear part work, uh, that exploded uh, just to destroy it. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but
So self-destruct as opposed to a
yeah,
boom.
Yeah.
to make sure it couldn't be reproduced or
Mm,
found.
Yes.
yeah.
So
Maybe a
that
little.
went down badly, and all that combined, we ended up non-nuclear. Uh, and after all this business, um, heading to where Amanda wants to be, I left the Air Force. I'd done some testing work, development work, so on. Ended up at the Ministry of Defence in Whitehall, flying a desk. And that went down not so well. And it was a time, funnily enough, ironically again, excuse me, a bit of a tight stuff here. It was a time of the IRA bombing campaign. There was lots of incidents and false alarms when you were traveling in on the train or in restaurants, and where you could park your car, where you couldn't. And so even there was an element of threat and fun. And
If I may ask, what year was that? What year?
that would be late 70s.
Late 70s.
Yeah.
It's 78, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, I
78.
left the Air Force in 78. I only worked at the invitation. I had a job offered me, and it was convenient with family life and so on. Time to go, make a change. And I was only there 2 years before I got an offer to join Litton Systems in Canada, who'd by then established themselves as part of the Canadian division of Litton Industries, again from California, um, as part of a defense procurement in Canada.
Well, I'm not sure if you can talk about it, but would be interesting to know what exactly were you doing for that company? Is it something you can talk about?
Well, yeah, that time it was all open information, because all we all that we were doing in Rexdale, uh, uh, part of Etobicoke, near the airport area in Toronto, and was what I call widget making. Um, the main Lytton product was based on mechanical gyros mounted on a gimbal platform uh, to produce navigation and guidance outputs. And uh, we we just made the gyros and the gimbals, and then we're slowly moving. And then they added wanted to get they thought we wanted to move into the systems, and partly that's why I was invited over. Uh, but at first, it was just commercial.
Yeah.
It was a time when aircraft like the 747, the DC-10, and the Lockheed 1011 were coming into service, and they were the first to have and use as their base guidance and navigation system an inertial system. That allowed them, for instance, to reduce a crew of a 707 or a DC-8 in the previous generation. They'd been a crew of 5. Well, now it was just 2 pilots.
Yeah. I'd love to add some information for people who don't know that what you're describing so casually was the highest level of technology for that time. As a matter of fact, this development, inertial navigation and gyroscopic navigation, it's obviously a long time before we had the GPS and other navigation methods. It is said and is documented they built it first for American bombers so they can more accurately. Before that, they had to drop like 200 bombs that maybe few of them, a handful of them, hit the target. they created a machine, a gyroscopic machine that would coordinate with the airplane, that they would secretly bring mounted on airplane before the flight and take it afterward in a black box. At any time, there was a navigator there and somebody, a sergeant, who would protect the machine and the navigator. And they had orders, if they would get captured, destroy the machine and kill the navigator. Wow. So this was such a high level of technology that they had the order to destroy the thing and kill the navigator. So no, this technology can be not be captured by by the enemy's America. Now, Mr. Bowler, you're casually discussing that, but this was at its time the highest level of.
What would you compare that to today?
AI. This
AI?
was today's, I would say AI. No, the idea was that, you would navigate with the stars, sun, and a compass at that point. And you might be there where you need to be, or you might not be there. And that was no guarantee that, you could, even when you were there, it was not a guarantee that you can deliver your payload, which is what that's war about, to where it needs to go. Now, this technology, practically putting a gyroscope, if it spins something heavy to a high rate, and that has an inertial kind of momentum that stays in that direction, that when you spin it, if I'm right, you would start the engine. One of the first things you would do, you would start that gyroscope, let it spin to and these things are not a big deal today, but at that time, all these the joints and so on, you had to be so precise that you would be able to gyroscopically, what was it, 60,000 RPM or more?
Yeah.
And I cannot tell you half a gram of difference in the weight, what it produces if you go to that kind of rate of gyroscopic rotation. So producing it, maintaining it, and putting it into the good use at that point was the highest level of technology, and military hold back on that for a long time before they were ready to give it to the commercial the airplanes. So please, I apologize for interrupting, but I think for people who don't know that, that's important information to know that what a high level of technology it was at that time. Please go ahead.
Yeah, and in fact, when you take the mathematics of each item and build it up, the civil authorities required that you had an average error rate going, say, across for the 747 type aircraft across the Atlantic or the Pacific of 2 miles an hour. They were expected to have enough airplanes going, all the airlines wanted to fly all about the same time, going east at night and west during the day, sort of traditional patterns which still exist, to maintain track safety. You were aiming for 2 nautical miles an hour. But when you think of the mathematics or arithmetic in every one of those equations, in all the parts, and then all the system, and to get that, and then you throw in a bit of wind here and there, and a bit of nature. It was quite a technological period of change.
But I'm assuming, as the Northrop machine was doing, that you could put the airspeed, the air direction, and other input into your system to compensate for the error. Is that correct?
That's right. You made it into a total navigator because you had sources of the other one, and of course at the same time we were into now the transistor age, and so we were being able to produce digital computing, tactical computing within these boxes, or to support them sometimes in a separate computer. But they were small enough and light enough with transistors to be able to carry in an aeroplane. Previously, with the old valves or tubes, as we call them, the box was bigger than the airplane. So
I'm not sure if Andy remembers those tubes. Andy,
Actually, I have a friend at work who is just crazy about audio systems, and he has rebuilt his own amplifiers and stuff. And he actually has some tubes that are stamped as CCCP from 1957. So yeah, I was actually over there during the holidays listening to some records, and it's fantastic. And yeah, these things weigh a ton.
That's
Absolutely.
right.
Yeah. Crazy.
And didn't do anything like a chip did. They're either on or they're off.
And they're hot, and they're getting really hot.
Yeah. And that's the other thing.
Well, that's the point too.
You've got to be able to get the heat out.
Very
Otherwise,
good point.
you're going to fry all your systems too.
Yeah. Because getting rid of heat in instruments and cockpits in particular is quite a problem. Well, Andy would know.
Well, the good news is at 40,000 feet, you just have to pretty cold out there. So that is good news. So now you are cooperating to bring this technology to the civil aviation at this point.
Lytton were the leaders of that. There was, and again, and this is interesting. Going back to an earlier point, it wasn't being done anywhere else. And Lytton not only developed the techniques, but and Honeywell and people like that against British companies and a French company trying. But what they achieved principally was they could produce it and reproduce it. And then you could, of course, provide it for whole bomber fleets, for the number of 747s and DC-10s and 1011s that were appearing around the world. And so, again, it was that ability to produce.
Yeah. So I know I've been checking the time, and I know Amanda really wants to get to this one subject that we've been slowly working up to the whole time.
Well,
all of that is interesting for me.
I know there's a lot of important information given first, I'm sure, to contextualize.
And this basis to where Dad's going to tell the story is what Lytton Systems in Toronto was doing was really almost civil aviation type stuff, but there was a
most peculiar thing happened to them, which led to the story Amanda wants us to get to. The essence of a commercial inertial box that we were discussing that could provide this total navigation and guidance information set to an airplane. As I say, the crew of a commercial aircraft came down from 5 to 2 because of that. That was converted into a box, which was selected for the navigation and guidance system of the then being developed cruise missile. Now, obviously, parts of the cruise missile were and are still classified, but the basic machine is not. It's a very simple, almost like a kid's toy aeroplane. That is not classified, and that could be done in the same factory as we were making thing. And Lytton won the contract for that. All we had to do was mold it into a box which fitted in to the cruise missile as against the 747. Now, of course, you're in a different world uh, here in terms of testing and military contract requirements and quality controls and that sort of thing. So there were differences in the requirements of the factory. But the essential thing was now we were, it was said we were making cruise missile parts. And we know how the media can, excuse me, reduce things down to an immediate way of saying things. Uh, and you start to mix it with the people, the activist group who are around, not quite as revolutionary as they were elsewhere. They weren't like the Weathermen or the Red Army or that sort of thing, but they're essentially more the sort of activist style. And oh dear, now I do apologise for this.
Don't worry.
But but one group uh, took it a stage further. They became self-styled urban guerrillas and called themselves Direct Action.
Are these Canadians we are talking about?
Sorry?
Are these people Canadians?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah, they're out of prison now and writing books, of course, um, and giving lectures at university. Um, and they were of the type of things where they were frustrated and dissatisfied with the way the activists were working. And of course, one of the biggest groups at the time was the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, the famous CND, who were fairly international sort of group. They appeared in all sorts of countries. Um, and we had a fairly comprehensive CND in Canada, building up from this history we mentioned earlier of being a bit uncomfortable with things nuclear. So what happened was this group became Direct Action. They wanted to kickstart people into being more of anarchy than activity, and so the first thing they did was it was a substation was being built. They started in the small town of Squamish or Squamish, I don't know quite how, Squamish, I think it is. It's on the coast road just north of Vancouver, an old logging railway town. Um, and so they went over to Vancouver Island and blew up this uh, uh, electricity substation being built. They didn't particularly want to go after people, but they wanted to make statements.
Yeah, and
So
I'm still amazed that we are talking about Canadians because
yeah,
it's just
absolutely.
It goes
The
against
whole
the
story, absolute spot on. The whole story is so Canadian, and they, and so and they did. There was a company doing pretty nasty sort of pornographic material and publishing that. So they bombed three of their stores and they messed about and they pinched the first lot of dynamite because they were very crude. Their bombs were only dynamite sticks.
So what did they call themselves again?
Well, they call themselves Direct Action, but
Okay.
but with the once it started and the media picked up, they became known as the Squamish Five. After
Skirmish
they'd been,
Five. I
after
like that
they'd been,
better.
after they'd been
Skirmish-
noted, it was two girls and three lads. They weren't
Now,
all that old.
did
And
they, apologize, did they call themselves anarchists?
I think they did in some writings.
Yeah, yeah.
And in fact, I haven't read it. One of them has just has written a book.
Yeah, I
So
need to give a little backstory to that because today in 2023, nobody in sound mind would call themselves anarchists.
no, that was a popular word at that time, wasn't it?
That is exactly the point I'm trying to
Yeah,
make. That in 1930s, for example, in Spain, there was a party they called the anarcho-syndicalists, meaning
yeah.
they called themselves like Nazis. They used to call themselves Nazis. Now it is a curse word. You Nazi, but Nazis used called it like fascists in Italy. They called themselves fascists. They were fascists and they called themselves fascists. So
Mhm.
I want to know people understand that anarchists at that time didn't have that meaning or emotion connotation that we attach to that. And there were people like far left, if I'm not mistaken, far left, that they wanted to break the conservative way of government in favor of whatever we're part of. And many of these people, they didn't make a fuss about calling themselves anarchist. And but that did not mean at that time what we understand today under that word. But I like the Skirmish Five much better. Please go on.
That's right.
The Squeamish Five, maybe, yeah.
Oh, squeamish. Uh, yeah, so uh, their first supply of dynamite they pinched from the Ministry of Transport out in British Columbia. Uh, then later on, they raided a mine and did damage there, and acquired illegally a lot of dynamite sticks. And by now, they'd latched on to the idea of from the CND were making noise about us, but realized that uh, we probably weren't making bombs, although they were trying to say that. We were just making some ordinary parts for the missile itself. And but they picked up on this. And another thing that helped them was at that time, and you said earlier on about all the things that contribute to these events. In Etobicoke Rexdale district of Toronto, there was a bylaw which said that industrial plants couldn't put a fence up immediately in front of themselves uh, before the road. You could put a security gate between buildings or at an entry or something like that. So we had three buildings, manufacturing buildings, uh, very simply electronic parts going together, the mechanical widgets, the accelerometers and gimbals, and then assembly into the system. Uh, and surprisingly, what happened was Lytton were the supplier and the design authority for the the guidance and navigation system in the cruise missile. And at that time, the U.S. Navy, who were the lead uh, uh, one of the Pentagon in contracting for it, introduced a second source manufacturing program. So when everything got through its acceptance and testing and development there and was going to go into production, there was a competition for somebody to be the second source. They weren't the design authority. They just made built to print, I think was the expression. And surprisingly, so we cheekily put in for that. And even more surprising, we got it.
So you're both design authority and second source.
No, we were just the second source. Well, Lytton did. Lytton were both, but there were strict rules about what we could talk to who and what, and because we had to compete every year for a 60-40 split on. This was the Navy's idea of competition and efficiency, and it was their latest idea at the time. So we had funny rules and funny meetings on what we could say to each other because we had to compete each year on price mainly and quality for our share. And so here we were starting to make these things. And the CND made noises and said, oh, well, they were going to have protests outside and do this and do that. Well, one night, we were just at the point where the Pentagon were going to appear for a manufacturing production readiness review. And the night before, so we'd been migrating, and what I've failed to say, I've realized, is I was, to my surprise, and Night of the Long Knives, I'd been parachuted in to be in charge of this manufacturing, the system building. That building was mine. We had about 450 people or so going 7 days a week, all 24-hour testing and so on. And it was a building where the offices were a bit like an air force or a airfield thing, where the offices are attached, offices on the outside, a bit like sunrooms, houses on the main building. And so we had just gone through a final rehearsal, gone down the road for a good night beer on our way home. And we heard a boom in the distance, and somebody said, oh, that would be great, wouldn't it, if our place had been blown up? We wouldn't have to do this thing tomorrow. Little did we know. These guys had got an ordinary van, the sort of electrician or a plumber would have, commercial van. They'd stuffed it with these dynamite sticks, about 500 pounds of the stuff. Can you imagine? I think it was 500 kilograms.
Massive. You use that to blow up dams.
If the IRA had got hold of that amount of thing, it would have taken them 10 years to use it 10 times more effectively, And so they drove up, and because there's no fence, they went straight up to the building, one of the buildings which could spread across, got out. There's some dispute as to how they did it, whether it was a self-timer on the thing or across the road. We were on the edge of the 27, the road due north. It was not a freeway, but it was 4 lanes, a bit of grass, but it was limited access to it with a fence. And there was somebody in the hotel which had been built on the other side of the road, and he could do it, with a wire
remote control or something.
Sort of thing.
No, did the remote controls for detonation exist at that time?
Yeah.
They did.
Yeah.
How did they get access to these explosives?
They stole it from a mine.
Like, how'd they get in the mine? Like, how did they know?
Something you need to know about this kind of people. These people are not dumb. That's why they can do so much damage. Right. That's why few of them can do so much damage. Like Red Army Fraction, you go and read about their history, the RAF, or even IRA people in Ireland and so on. These are few people totally committed, and most of them are university graduates. And
Oh yeah, you never underestimate just because you label somebody an anarchist or a terrorist doesn't
There
mean
are
they're
at least,
stupid.
Oh no,
Yeah.
I for sure assume that these people are extremely intelligent, but I'm saying like, are we like, why did we not? I don't know. I'm not trying to be rude, but like protect our explosives a little bit better.
yeah, well, that
Yeah.
is that all goes with that these people are smart enough to get their hands on what they need for whatever belief they have, and
they would have observed what the Department of Transport did
Yeah.
with their supply system and the mine and where it
yeah,
was in the
yeah,
mine.
Well, and really,
They
until
worked it
something
all
like
out.
this
And,
happens, people don't look back and say, "Oh, we could have done something differently there."
yeah,
yeah,
You know, I mean, the mines may well have had a lax kind
who
of
knows?
safety system.
Yeah.
It could have been you pay somebody off.
well,
That's the one that works the best,
There's two
right?
solutions to your question, Amanda. You could try Googling it, or you could buy this woman's book.
Yeah, don't tell you how they
I've
did.
just thought she might have actually in the book, she might answer your
I
question.
I'm
think
sure she does.
I think something everybody will need to learn from this podcast is that these kind of people, they are not your ordinary criminals, that they
No,
became criminal because they could do nothing else. They
yeah,
are
Yeah.
ideologically driven people, and they are highly educated, highly motivated. And that's why they can do few of them that can do so much damage. Underestimating them is one of the biggest mistake any governmental group or group of people as a general can
yeah,
do.
Yeah.
Underestimate
yeah,
their motivation, their resolve, and their intelligence.
Hmm.
yeah. They put together what they knew about the the time and also what was available to them at the time. And for instance, you had the distance from where they parked the van up against the wall to the road. The road had grass verges, a wide 4-lane highway. Same thing on the other side. A single story, some business, manufacturing plants, and so on. And the wheel of one of the wheels of the van was found on the roof on the other side of it. Now, what a waste of energy that was, wasn't it?
Yes, that
It
is.
took
You
a wheel
know,
like
that
300
shows
yards.
Well, you're
what doctors have said to you know, great ideology, a lot of intelligence and application, but it doesn't always, you know,
you're
Doesn't
looking at
always
it
work
as a
out in the
they're
true
not
execution.
they're
genius.
not all that smart or efficient. No.
Yeah.
And and the blast blew a hole in our wall, went straight through that building, across to, unfortunately, the only person injured just across the gap and the entryway was our guardhouse and control point, and one of the night staff was badly injured.
Hmm.
Luckily, the police had just been called to look at this suspicious thing, and somebody saw something, and the police were just running away. He'd helped them on their way with the blast, but they
Wow.
weren't hurt.
And
Um,
we were at home. We actually saw this on the news. We
yeah,
saw it, and we knew that it was Dad's office
and
that had been.
I was on my way home, and I just
Yeah,
heard the other thing.
and there's no cell phones to call, right? So we
Yeah.
Oh,
had
What
about a
was
30-minute
and
wait.
family?
my office was the corner office, uh, sticking out on the third building.
Mhm.
And of course, it was a lot of fair amount of glass windows and that sort of thing, and lightly constructed against
Yeah.
the main building, and that just went zoom and disappeared
Yeah.
through.
Now, do you think, just a question, did they choose the time and the location for maximum or minimum damage to people, these people? They,
No, I don't think they considered people, and I think by going
oh,
to that
okay.
time of night, they didn't think there'd be anybody there, and as it turned out, um, the only people, and they weren't sure, I don't think, of what was behind the wall they chose. Um, I don't think people were involved in the equation at all,
Okay, so they wouldn't
and
consider.
that seems to uh, look through how what they did elsewhere
Mhm.
too. It was a statement, draw attention to it, and so on.
Irregard of human cause, and that is always a hallmark of extremism. That you might have an opinion or another opinion, but when your ideological goals do not include how much damage you will do to people and so on, that's a hallmark of extremism, no matter what direction.
Yeah.
So,
Or environment.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, I just shook my head later and thought, I came out of school. By the time I was 20, I had a live nuclear bomb strapped to my backside with the key to go, that sort of thing. And I come all this way to nice, peaceful Canada to start a new civilian life, and then I'm blown away.
Well, now, I consider those nuclear bombs by themselves are one of the safest thing. The amount of the safety
Oh, yeah.
go to them. Now, you can drop them from an airplane. They don't just explode. You
No.
can you can bomb a nuclear bomb. They still don't.
If you haven't selected everything correctly and aimed it correctly, and it won't
Won't go boom.
Yeah.
won't do the job for you. No.
So you flying one of those nuclear bombs is, in my opinion, is less dangerous than pissing off some extremist in Canada.
Well, and suffice to say, the bylaws in Etobicoke were changed right after that.
Oh, right away.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, there's a
Yes.
lot of
Yeah.
fencing up now.
What
Yes.
happened to those people? To those terrorists, extremists?
The RCMP at that time the RCMP were responsible for security and intelligence type work as well. CSIS hadn't been invented, uh, and they soon worked out who these folk were, and they laid a trap for them on a bridge back in the Vancouver area. They dressed up as a road repair crew, uh, and these guys come along, and of course they had to stop while they filled the hole in, and that's how they got them.
Got them. Well, they're lucky. They were caught in Canada, because in the United States they would be shot and then handcuffed. So
Yeah.
Well, they'd still be in prison.
yeah,
They'd still be in prison if it was in the United States.
So are they free now?
Yes, they're free now. Yeah.
Unbelievable, right?
Well, it's unbelievable. Yeah.
But this is the humanity in Canada. You see, there is a humanity in Canada no, seriously.
No, there is humanity in Canada for sure, but it's like these people are dangerous.
Well, they were. I mean, the argument could be made that a lot of protest is done by the young, by university students, because at that time, that's the way they're thinking, that their brains are still developing. They're still looking at the world and making judgment calls. And, they tend to get excited very quickly, even more than I do in my 50s.
Yeah.
And, so that's the kind of mentality that you're working with, where they'll just focus and just go in one direction. And it's not till later in life that we learn more about the world. We're looking at different things. We've had different experiences. We've had children, and we're suddenly looking at the world in a much different way. And where we viewed the world as a young university student, maybe a little angry about the wars and the things going on. It's not till later that you really get that common sense. Now, for me, I remember hearing when I was a teenager in early 20s some of the sentences they got, and they were very low. And I was thinking, come on, you nearly killed my dad, for goodness sakes. You should be gone for life.
Yeah.
But you got to look at the other end, and you got to say, well, these people had a point to make. They made their point. They got caught. They did their time. If they're decent people now, and they look back upon reflection, and hopefully with some regret, is it such a bad thing?
No lives were lost, which is, I think, like
yes, and I think
go ahead.
Yes, that's a very, very good point. If lives had been lost, Amanda, I think it would have been very different.
That's right, yeah.
Now, what I'm saying is that certainly they don't deserve to be free or be freed up and so on, but we as a society have higher values. Like in Sweden and in Finland, prison is not where you get punished. Prison is the place that you go,
reflect.
You are treated like
they re-educate,
Yeah.
You're treated like a human being, and you become a human being. You treat people like animals, they become animals. If you treat them like human beings, now they personally maybe don't deserve that, but we as a society, we do deserve better to have a level of humanity. Like we can go on and on and on. Like in some other countries, they do things differently than we in the United States. I think that's something we can learn here from them.
Yes, we don't really want to produce better criminals, do we?
Yeah, you got it. I think that is what I'm going to use. I tried many words. In truth, that is all you can approach many people in this country, that make the prison in a place that you're not training better criminals.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is the word of the day. Well, this has been a bliss for me. I'm a very huge fan as on the technology side, on the aviation, on the military stuff. Like I knew Vulcan and I knew its history and so on, but this was a real bliss for me to hear it from firsthand.
And we did get to Amanda's point.
Yes. Well, I apologize because I know how my dad and I talk. So I was checking my phone.
I could sense that, yeah.
The project manager took over and is like, okay, we got to keep Dad going, or we'll never get there.
Thank you. Well, he was in good company. Dr. Abbasi loves talking too.
Yeah.
Loves listening.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It has been
a pleasure. Yeah.
Brilliant.
No, it was an interesting chance to put it all together again and see there's lines all over the place, but all sort of feeding in got some connection in some way, right?
And now it will be preserved for eternity.
There we go.
There we go.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you guys and for joining, and thanks for watching. This was Essence of History. I'm Amanda Armagast. I'm Dr. Abbasi for Essence, and we have our special guests.
Ivor Barlow and Andy. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
And it's good night from me, and it's good night from him. Yeah.
Thank you very much.